Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? Welcome to this segment of the Women's Connection. With me is a woman who's going to tell us how to market ourselves, which I'm sure we all can improve upon. Because the only woman I know who is an expert at marketing herself is Madonna. And I would like to welcome Marion Gold. Marion, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Barry. It's a pleasure.
Let's start about a definition you came up with, personal publicity. Why don't you give us a definition for that?
Personal publicity is how you present yourself to the world. It gives you an opportunity to build your own image directed towards the audience you're trying to reach.
Well, why is personal publicity important to a woman in her business career?
Well, it's really important to anyone in their business career, but women seem to need a little more help in pushing themselves towards doing a little publicity.
Because?
Well, I think that we're so used to being in the background, and I don't want to generalize and say that all women are used to that, because that wouldn't be true. But the fact of the matter is that if you look at the pictures in the advertising age or in Crane's Chicago business, since I'm based in Chicago, you see lots and lots of photographs of men in the spotlight with famous people, and where are the women? Well, you might see them at the cocktail parties, but we're just not quite as good at promoting ourselves as we should be.
Well, what would you say a woman should do?
Well, I think it depends on what their goal is, and that's the most important thing, is what is it you want to accomplish for yourself? Are you looking for a job? Do you have a special cause that you want to promote? What is it you want people to know about you? And to start with, then, you have to find out what they already think about you, because it might not be the same thing as what you had imagined.
Well, how do you start to find out what people think of you, or at least your boss or the general public?
Well, you ask them. If it's a matter of a boss or a supervisor, there are sort of ways of getting little things into a conversation. For instance, if you have a monthly meeting, a review of some sort of your work, just saying, well, how do you think about how I handled that situation? What is the impression that I made on you? You'll solve two things, and you will get an answer. And I think that your boss, whether it's a man or a woman, is also going to be impressed that you had the insight to want to know what they thought, given that they're such important people.
Oh, how interesting.
And asking your friends, what do you think about me? What do you think is my strongest suit? When this interview is over, maybe I'll ask you, what do you think was my strongest suit in doing that interview? Where was I weak? What could I have done better? What's the image that I present? Do I present the image of a businesswoman? Do I present the image of an activist? What is it you really think about me? Those are important things to have as you start to put your goals in order.
Well, that's very interesting. I never would have thought of asking my boss, how did I handle that situation? Because you would automatically feel that your boss, whether it's a woman or a man, should be automatically telling you handled it well, because then again, I guess you're looking for the pat on the back or the encouragement, or maybe you're asking too much of a boss to do that.
I think it probably depends on the level that you are within your career. If we're going to talk about somebody who has a job and is looking to advance themselves in that job, or is looking for another job. And I think it's how you position it, too. I mean, you're looking for feedback because you want to do better and better. And I don't think there's a boss around that's going to object to having a discussion with you about that.
Unless he feels intimidated by your capabilities and the fact that you are about to take over his job.
Then I think you ought to be looking for another job if that's the situation. That happens. That does happen.
Now, if the boss said you did fine and he can't give you any constructive criticism,
make a list of questions that you had in mind. Be a little more specific. Put them on the spot, for example. It's like a situation where you might go in and say, well, I want to be a vice president. What does it take? Are you going to be satisfied with the answer of, well, when you're ready? Well,
no,
you want to know specifically, don't you?
Right.
So look at the particular situation. Maybe it was a business presentation. Let's say you were meeting a client for the first time. Then you might want to ask your supervisor something like, well, how did you feel about the way I introduced myself? Do you feel I presented a very positive image to that person? How would you have liked me to do it better?
Oh, interesting.
Depending. I mean, not to be afraid to get criticism. Obviously, you're not going to do it in a room full of people. You're going to do it in a one-on-one. Go out for a cup of coffee with them. Say, you know what, let's talk about this. I'm really interested in advancing my career, and I want to get even better at what I'm doing. Don't say you're not doing well now. You want to get even better.
Always keep the positive going.
Always keep the positive going.
How do you decide what image do you want to create?
Well, the first thing is you have to be true to yourself, and that's why it is important to find out what other people think about you, because perception is reality. And so there's two things to keep in mind. Number one, if you create an image that's false, people out there aren't stupid. You're not going to be able to live up to it, and that's not going to work for you. So you need to really know who you are and what it is you want to present to the audience. So the second step to that, and it really has to be the next question, is deciding who it is you're presenting to. What is the audience that you're going out after? And then you have to look at what is that audience looking for, and how do my strong suits fit the needs of that audience, be it a potential employer or a newspaper writer or whatever. And then you have to kind of blend those two things together. So it's not something that you can do overnight. It takes some work. It's hard work. You're really looking inside, you're looking outside, and then you're trying to put those things together to find a bridge between you and your audience.
And it's like, sorry, the question just slipped my mind about moving on. It's getting rid of all your negative qualities and moving on, and it's a growth process.
It's a growth process. Maybe some of the things you consider negative about yourself aren't negative to the audience that you're going to.
Okay.
Maybe you're shy, for example. Maybe you're a little more laid back. You're not really aggressive. Well, maybe the audience that you're going to be directing your information or presenting yourself to is going to like you better if you're a little laid back. So I think you really do have to look at both things. It's a dual process. You can't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a famous writer, and I'm going to let everybody know, well, you know, we all hope that that's going to happen for us if you want to write. But you have to find out, okay, what is it that I want to write about? Who is it that's going to be interested in reading what I have to say, and how can I say it so that it enhances their lives? And then you're going to build that relationship. It's all about relationships, really. The personal publicity planner isn't something you do that I wrote a book about. It isn't something that you do in a closet by yourself. It's a process of learning how to present who you are and what you are to your audience. Because if someone's going to buy a product from you, if they're going to do business with you, or they're going to work with you, they want to know who you are and what you're all about. It's that person-to-person communication that's so important.
Well, very interesting. They want to know who you are. It also, I remember finding out who they are, because do you want to work with them? I mean, you're spending an awful lot of time with the individual, or at least the company and their culture. And I remember one time I was in an interview, and I was asking questions, and he was asking me questions, and there wasn't a piece of paper on the man's desk. It was unbelievable. Couldn't believe how organized he was, which was a little on the frightening side. But during the course of the interview, he said, who's interviewing who? And I said, we're both interviewing each other, because it's a two-way street. Do I want to work for you, and do you want to hire me? But I think he was a little intimidated.
Oh, it's interesting. See, you felt he was intimidated. I guess I would have looked at it like, aha, I did something positive, because all of a sudden he realized that I was trying to learn about him. And people are usually flattered when you want to learn about them.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I would have looked at that a little differently, but I wasn't there. And I don't know. Perception. Maybe he was offended. I don't know. It is. It's perception. And perception is reality. In advertising, public relations, and presenting yourself, perception is reality. And so you really do have to be very careful and make sure that you're presenting the image that you want to live up to.
Well, he was probably surprised. Apparently, it never happened to him before. And so I said to myself, great, I'm a trendsetter. But it was just really kind of funny at the moment.
Your answer to him was quite good, actually. We're interviewing each other, because that is what it's all about.
Now, what about with people who stab you in the back, and how do you get the shreds out, or shards of the glass and the knives out of your back? How do you handle that?
Well, I guess, and to be perfectly honest with you, I don't really address that aspect of it in my book, because I'm more directed towards having to reach your own goal. But of course there are people there that are going to get great delight in tripping you up. And I guess if you set your sights on your goal and you move ahead, and someone is blatantly standing in your way, you reassess what you're doing, because maybe what the problem is you were directing your message to the wrong person, the wrong audience. Maybe you have to shift gears a little bit. So I would guess that if that's happened, That's what I would do, is shift gears. I mean, if you're climbing the corporate ladder, I mean, there's going to be lots of people that are going to try to pull the rungs out, you know, and so that you kind of trip up. And you just have to continually assess the situation. Maybe you're in the wrong environment. Maybe you're doing something the wrong way. I mean, maybe you haven't taken the time to see how they really do perceive you. Maybe they're looking at you in an entirely different way than you can possibly imagine. I mean, you might think that you're doing something nice for someone, and they're looking at it in a different context. So you really do have to look at what they expect from you, and then build your message and do what it is you need to do. And again, it depends on if you're working your way up one company ladder, or you're starting your own business, or you're working for a charity. Your goal is very important.
What is the most exciting thing that you have ever done for yourself to promote yourself? Before you started your business,
Before I started my business.
Right, because we're going to find out how you started your business after.
Well, that's an excellent question, because what got me on this track was I realized that I had built a company from like $250,000 to like $13 million. I mean,
wow,
I had
it's quite impressive.
really worked very hard. I got a lot of pats on the back. The people that I worked around and my clients respected me, and they knew who I was. But I was flipping through the trade magazines, and I didn't see my name, and I didn't see my picture. And I thought, you know, what's wrong with this picture? What's going on? And I realized that if I want to be well known within my field, that I'm going to have to do my own publicity. So the most exciting thing I did was decide that I didn't want to work there anymore. I was sort of tired of climbing that ladder and hitting my head against the same wall all the time. And if I was going to move out, people needed to know who I was, what I was all about, and why what I had to offer was going to enhance what they were doing. So the first thing that I did after I decided to leave was I wrote a letter to Working Woman magazine. They had a special career strategy column where they highlighted women. And I sat there, and this was my first lesson for this book, actually. I sat there and I thought, well, why would Working Woman magazine want to do a feature on me? You know, who am I, right?
Right.
So I thought about the questions I had about starting my own business, and how would those questions impact other women who were starting their own businesses. And that's how I positioned it. And lo and behold, they did a feature article on me. And I guess, at least at that point in time, that was one of the most exciting things that happened. Was here I was going to launch my own company, and a major national magazine going to an audience that was important to me, which were other women who had the same thing in their mind. And they were going to write about me. And so that was the first exciting thing. And following that was just going out and doing it.
What did your boss say when you got all the publicity?
Well, I was already out of the company when the article ran, and I speak on this subject a lot, and what I generally tell people is I've probably burned every bridge that I ever professionally had crossed. I'm very good at that, it seems. I'm a very good bridge burner. And I did express the truth in the article, in that I felt that I should be moving ahead to another position, and that just wasn't going to happen, and that was what made me decide to go off on my own. So I don't think he was real happy about that, but on the positive side of it, he did give me opportunities. When I came into the company, I was working part-time, and it was one of those things where he opened up the door and he said, you know, you do it. And he was very supportive, but...
Did you ever explain to him that you were disappointed that you never saw your name in the trade magazines, or had the publicity?
I'm not sure that was his responsibility. I mean, it would have been nice if he had helped that along.
Right.
But I think that was more my responsibility, and that's why I feel that I need to tell other women that they need to do that on their own, because not only is it good for them, but it's good for their company. And I did start writing trade articles just before I left the job that had gotten published. But I think it was more of it was more of a corporate thing. I felt that I should be moved into a different position that just wasn't going to happen, and you know, I got as far as I was going to go. I was a woman in a man's world. Yeah, that's changing some in healthcare communications, which is what I was in. But I think that, you know, on the positive side is that I learned so much in communications within that arena and dealing with different types of people, that it was then really very easy for me to make the transition the one regret I have is while I was moving up the ladder, I didn't talk about it more, because I do believe that women have more of a responsibility to other women. I mean, in my division, I hired a lot of professional women. In fact, I was once accused of discrimination. I know, my own supervisor, who was a man, used to say to me, one of these days somebody is going to sue you for not hiring them because they're a man. And I said, I find a man who's qualified for the job, I'll hire him. You know, just the women were qualified, the men weren't. And so I felt pretty good about that. But that is sort of one of my things, is I think that when women are in a position to be able to make a difference for other women, they have to do it. And they have to do it by talking about it and taking action. And there are women who choose to do it from the inside. At that point in my career, I felt that it was time for me to do it from the outside, and that the ties that bind were binding me too much. And I couldn't talk about the things I wanted to talk about in terms of gender discrimination until I left.
Oh, that's too bad.
So,
but that happens. But at least you were able to move on to something else that you still enjoyed.
Very much,
and
yeah,
so you opened up your own company.
Yes, yeah, and mostly I write. From the time that I left the company, the first I guess it was about 5 years ago now, I've had some 40 editorial pieces published, almost exclusively on the issues of women in the workforce and diversity, and written 2 books, and have my own public relations company, and I just love it. I'm just having a ball. It's wonderful.
It's fantastic. If you were going to start, okay, let's go back a second. Starting your first publicity thing, and after you have asked your boss or your coworkers what they think of you, would you say, you know, and how you can, I guess the right word is not what they think of you.
It's not what they think of you, but what do you think is my strongest suit?
Okay.
What is it about me that you sometimes say, that's great? And what is it about me that you say that's not so great? Now, I'm not sure that I would ask my coworkers before I ask my friends. And if you're in a supervisory position, you need to be very careful how you position that. And so I think that if you're looking at moving on to your own business, for example, I would talk to my friends first. I would, you know, hopefully you've had an ongoing dialogue with a supervisor, and if you are in a managerial position, hopefully you've had an ongoing dialogue with people who work for you and you have a sense for that already. But if you have a friend who's on the staff, it isn't a bad idea to say, you know, what do you think they really think about me when I do that? You know,
and hopefully they're not jealous of you.
Well, you have to be careful. You know, it's like with anything else. You have to use some judgment. You know, some people are comfortable doing it and some aren't.
Well, Marion, what would you like to leave the audience with?
The most important thing is you. You are very important. You have talents, you have strong suits, you have weak points. Maybe there are things that can be made stronger. Maybe there are things that can't, and you need to understand that and know that. And you have a cause. Now, that cause is either you want to have your own business, or you want to move up the corporate ladder, or maybe you're a member of the PTA and the school board is real important to you and you'd like to run and be on the school board. The most important thing is to learn who your audience is, what kind of information they need, and what it is in you that can provide that information to them, because that's how you build that bridge. And that's how you begin to market yourself, by understanding who your audience is and how you can meet the need of that audience. So on the one hand, it's selfish. You're marketing yourself, you have a goal, but you are not going to succeed unless you meet somebody else's need. You have to have a two-way street.
Interesting, because then they perceive your worth.
Absolutely.
Well, Marion, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And I loved reading your book,
Thank you.
A Guide to Marketing You. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for joining us. And are you marketing you to your full potential? Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome. Today we're going to talk to the author of The Passionate Gardener, Georgia Raimondi. Georgia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
You brought a beautiful basket. Well, it's not even a basket. It looks like a miniature garden here.
It is exactly that.
Can you explain what you've done here?
Yes, miniature gardens are fun and easy to do, and they're a wonderful garden for someone who's an urban dweller because they are small.
Perfect for New York.
Exactly, fit beautifully on a balcony or a terrace, and also wonderful for a homeowner. They look beautiful on a front porch or on a patio, and they're very easy to do.
What have you got in here? I smell so many different fragrances.
Yes, well, actually, the first thing I was going to tell you about is what to put it in.
Oh, all right.
And this happens to be just an old crate that I found, and I think it's really fun if you use your imagination instead of just using a traditional terracotta flower pot or a large flower pot. And this happens to be a crate, and I like it because it's weathered and it has character. Another option might be a very large galvanized wash basin. So all those things are kind of fun and easy to find and accessible, and they add character.
So these are things that you would find on the street when somebody's disposing of them and
yes,
so forth.
exactly, or even the wash basin you can find very easily at any hardware store.
Okay.
So they add character, I think, to the garden. And then what I've done in here is I've really combined a lot of annuals and some herbs because I have a very large cottage garden as well at my home, but so I sort of take that idea and then I miniaturize it into a small box. And I like the idea of combining flowers with herbs, and we have some wonderful, we have verbena, and we have swan daisies, and some snapdragons, and some petunias, and then I've added some ivy. I like the way the things cascade over the front. I think it adds a very nice sort of lyrical,
with
and then
your miniature watering can here.
And you can sort of let your imagination take flight and add all these like a little garden nymph and a miniature watering can and so forth.
Now you've mixed the flowers with the herbs.
Right.
Is there any rhythm to doing that?
Well, actually, you could also do a complete herb, a whole miniature herb garden if you want. The reason why I added these, happens to be a golden sage, and I just love the foliage and the colors. And then I've added a rosemary because I just love the fragrance of the rosemary as well. So you can really pick some of your favorite herbs and make it a complete herb garden, or you can mix in some of the herbs with the flowers. And one of the things that your audience and any gardener should probably be aware of when doing one of these miniature gardens is that you do have to provide for drainage. So you either have to drill holes in the bottom of the container, or the other option is to put plastic down, add a layer of gravel, and then add some potting soil on top of it. And one other thing they have to remember is that to try to combine, which is really sort of addressing the question you asked me about, is to really combine plants that have the same requirements for light and water.
Okay, well, how do you know that? Well, it's addressed in your book.
Yes.
So that's a good way to know that.
So these are really mostly all flowers or herbs that really want sun. And so that's important because you wouldn't want some flowers that require shade in the same box as the ones with flowers.
Well, I have a question about the ivy.
Yes.
It requires a lot of sun?
Ivy is one of those things, it does require sun, but it will also do fairly well in light shade, in shade as well.
Oh, okay.
But most flowers, and this is a general statement, do require sun, and most of your herbs do require sun. There are a few herbs that can do okay in shade.
What other herbs would you put in here if you wanted to? Because let's say this is outdoors. Isn't there some kind of a chemistry between herbs and flowers that will keep, let's say, the bugs away?
Well, actually, yes, it's interesting because most insects do not like herbs. They really don't like anything that's terribly aromatic.
Ah.
So that's a great way to sort of garden organically in a sense, because if you combine some very highly scented herbs in with your flowers, it will sometimes keep the insects away.
Well, that's great because I'm allergic to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I get stung, and I mean, it's like, how did you get stung? I have no idea. I was out in the garden. Whose garden? You know.
The only thing is that, interestingly enough, we do want as many bees in our garden as possible.
Well, for the pollination of the flowers. So you have
exactly.
You do have a problem there.
Yes, and mint and thyme in particular, they love mint and thyme. So I try to grow a lot of that because they're attracted to the flowers that grow, that come out on the thyme. So I try to incorporate as many flowers and herbs in my garden so that I can attract as many bees as possible for the pollinating.
You go back to drainage a minute.
Yes.
In a box this size, which can be very heavy, you're talking about drainage. And if you put it in an apartment and you have your 2 inches of gravel, how do you know when to water it again? I mean, you can be the soil can be dry,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got all this water down in the gravel.
Yeah, it will help absorb it. I think probably most people tend to water things too frequently.
That's me.
Yes.
I had over 100 plants at one time, and now we're down to about 4.
Exactly. So the best thing is to really just, I use my hand a lot, and when they are dry, they are going to need water, but just water sparingly so that you're not flooding the container.
Okay.
The other thing that's kind of fun is that if you are in a urban area, you can also garden like as if you have a lot of acreage, because here I am deadheading flowers. These need to be deadheaded, and this is exactly what I do in my own garden, so you can actually do this even with a miniature garden. So it's fun, it's whimsical, it's easy, and in addition to the annuals and the herbs, you could also do alpine plants, you could do sedums or succulents, so there's a whole variety as long as the plants are slightly miniatured.
Okay, let's go back a minute. What are sedums and succulents?
There are a certain variety of plants. Sedums will be like, have you heard of hens and chicks?
Yes.
Those wonderful
Oh, I
little
love them.
Yes, yes, so you could do a variety of those as well.
Okay.
And so there are a number of things that you can utilize in a miniature box.
Now, if you're going away on a vacation, is there any way to sustain it so that it's flowering and it's self-watering?
Well, there are self-watering systems that are available at nurseries and garden centers.
Oh, good. Well, I want to thank you, Georgia,
Well, thank
so
you,
much.
Barrie. It
It's
was a
been
pleasure.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Got to bring these back again. And thank you. I hope we've added a little beauty to your life, especially here in the city with a passionate gardener. Bye now.